Welcome back to Short Times, where we bring you the latest and greatest movie recaps in just a few minutes. Today, we're diving into The Banker, a 2020 American period drama film directed by George Nolfi. This film tells the inspiring true story of Joe Morris and Bernard Garrett, two of the first African American bankers in the United States. Despite facing racial segregation and discrimination, these men use a white man as a front to buy properties and banks in the 1960s. In the year 1954, a smart and rational man named Bernard Garrett, played by Anthony Mackie, decides to move with his wife Eunice, played by Nia Long, from Willis, Texas to Los Angeles. Bernard, who had saved a considerable amount of money from his successful business, had dreams of venturing into the real estate industry. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, he comes across an ideal building that could be his first real estate project, but it's just a little too expensive for him to afford. Eunice, being the supportive wife that she is, suggests that he gets a co-investor to help him with the funding. She then introduces him to her old friend Joe Morris, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who owns a club in the city. Bernard and Joe have a strong dislike for each other, with Joe's boisterous personality and penchant for drinking and using profanity being a major turnoff for Bernard. Despite this, Bernard approaches the building owner, Patrick Barker, played by Combe Meany, and presents his plan to buy the building for $10,000 less than the asking price, with the intention of renovating it and making a profit. Initially, Patrick is hesitant, but Bernard's persistence and determination eventually wins him over. The building proves to be a huge success, and Patrick is so impressed that he asks Bernard to go into business with him. They agree to split the profits 50-50, with Patrick taking on the role of frontman in order to overcome the racism of the time, which would make it difficult for a black man like Bernard to buy properties. The business is highly successful, and Bernard and Eunice move into a luxurious home. However, when Patrick passes away in his sleep, his wife reneges on the agreement and offers to buy out Bernard's share of the properties at a fraction of their worth. Faced with this setback, Bernard comes up with a new plan. He decides to buy a building in downtown Los Angeles that contains most of the bankers, knowing that by owning it, he will be able to learn more about properties and buy more. However, he is in need of funds and reluctantly turns to Joe for help. Joe points out that no one will sell the building to a black man and suggests that they need a front person to buy it on their behalf. Bernard chooses Matt Steiner, played by Nicholas Hoult, one of his renovation workers, to be the front man. Bernard, Joe, and Matt spend a month preparing Matt for his role as the front man in their plan to buy the building, teaching him the basics of golf and providing him with the knowledge and skills he needs to understand the math of property and buildings. Matt is able to memorize enough information to convince the owner to sell, and Bernard and Joe become the first black men to own a building in downtown. From there, they go on to become extremely successful in buying over 100 properties all over Los Angeles. In 1963, Bernard travels back to Willis to visit his father, and while there, he witnesses the ongoing racism and segregation that still exists in the town. This inspires him to come up with a new idea. He wants to buy the local mainland bank and finally give loans to black people so that they can become homeowners or start small businesses. Joe, who initially thinks it's a terrible idea, agrees to support Bernard when he decides to go through with it on his own. Once again, they use Matt as the front man for the purchase, but this arouses the suspicions of the bank's current owner's son, Robert Florence Jr., played by Scott Daniel Johnson, who stays on as a 20% shareholder. The plan is initially successful, and they are able to give loans to black people. But Florence eventually catches on and threatens them with the possibility that if the truth is revealed, all the white people will withdraw their money. Meanwhile, Matt's wife pressures him to not just be an employee, but an owner. He presents Joe and Bernard with a plan to buy a second bank, which they initially think is too risky. However, Matt argues that if he can run his own bank, he has to move on, and that without a white person in charge at mainland, they would be doomed. Reluctantly, they agree. Matt buys a collection of loan packages, but soon his bank comes under federal audit. It turns out that Matt did not use the lawyer that Bernard had recommended, but instead got one from Florence, who then put bad loans into the package. In an attempt to fix the problem, Matt buys those loans at mainland, but it ends up getting him, Joe, and Bernard all arrested under federal banking laws. During the federal trial, Senator McClellan, played by James Dumas, is running the proceedings and promises Matt that he will face decades in prison if he doesn't testify that he did everything as Joe and Bernard ordered. McClellan's goal is to use the trial to change banking laws, making it so that the owners of banks are always public information, making it impossible for minorities to ever own again. He tells Bernard that if he doesn't make the trial political, and instead admits to being a crook, he can avoid jail time. However, Bernard chooses to use his testimony as an opportunity to speak about how the system prevents Black people from getting an equal opportunity for advancement and the American dream. As a result of the trial, Bernard and Joe lose all of their properties except one and are sentenced to 3 years in jail. Florence takes ownership of Mainland. When Bernard is released, Joe and Eunice pick him up. Eunice asks where they're going and Bernard reveals that the night before his testimony, Matt called him, feeling guilty, and was able to transfer ownership of 2 homes in the Bahamas to him. A postscript tells us that Joe and Bernard were able to start over and begin doing business from the Bahamas. In 1968, the Fair Housing Act was passed, making it illegal for anyone to deny renting or selling a property to someone based on the color of their skin. The Banker is a must-watch film for anyone interested in the history of race relations in America, and for those who want to be inspired by the story of 2 men who fought for their dreams. We highly recommend this film and give it a solid 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more movie reviews on Short Times.